In 1773, a mob of paranoid, angry townspeople armed with tubs of tar and torches burned down Essex Hospital in Massachusetts during an outbreak of smallpox, under the belief that the facility was infecting them all. In June 1773, Marblehead, Massachusetts was stricken by an outbreak of smallpox. The typical response to an outbreak was undertaken: quarantine, inspecting cargo arriving into the town, and limiting out-of-town visitors. However, some advocate a new preventative method still in its infancy: inoculation. The practice of vaccination, as it is also called, had yet to become widespread. Early practices included transferring pus from a patient infected with a similar, milder disease to a healthy person through rubbing it into a scratch. For example, a doctor would use a cowpox case to inoculate against smallpox. Though it should be noted that using cowpox was not done until 1798. Prior to that, a different strain of smallpox, one that had a lower mortality rate, was used. On August 9, 1773, a town meeting in Marblehead was held to debate the construction of a public inoculation hospital on one of the nearby islands. The proposal was rejected, but the majority did agree to allow a private funding of a hospital, as long as the town could regulate it. In October 1773, a private inoculation hospital, known as Essex Hospital or Castle Pox, in Marblehead was built on a nearby island, and sparked controversy among the townspeople. The four wealthy proprietors, all of whom would become prominent figures in the American Revolution, fought with the local townspeople, primarily fishermen, over its existence and regulation. From the townspeople's point of view, these potential inoculators could be infectious and spread the deadly disease to the entire town. Their fears were not unfounded. Those who were inoculated were still infectious and needed to be carefully isolated. A recently inoculated patient could easily spread the disease to those who had never been exposed. Inoculation hospitals could lead to significant improvements in public health, but they also could start an outbreak. Most who voted for the hospital assumed it would serve the general welfare of the town. They were wrong. The new facility charged too much for most of the residents to receive treatment. It became clear Essex Hospital was to serve the region's wealthiest citizens. Soon the hospital proprietors faced additional criticism. Patients began leaving earlier than the allotted isolation period. Visitors traveled to and from Castle Pox, and infected clothing left the facility. In December, while the third wave of patients began their stay, the town saw a renewed outbreak of smallpox. Residents called a town meeting. It was agreed that the hospital needed more regulation to keep the town safe. Patients were to remain on the island for 30 days, rather than the previous 21 at most, and non-Marblehead residents were no longer to be accepted. The proprietors chafed at these restrictions, arguing that their actions should not be restricted by the town, as they were a privately run operation, and claiming these rules were illegal and improper. The argument, in addition to the escaping patients, only further enraged residents. One family left at 25 days rather than 30, and hospital boats continually docked at unauthorized ports where working sailors could be exposed. On the night of January 18, 1774, a mob gathered at the house of the family who left the hospital early. They intended to burn the place with oil. They soon realized the family had fled the day before, but this didn't douse the flames of rage. 1 week later, 4 townsmen were caught stealing contaminated clothing from the island while attempting to smuggle them into Marblehead. Presumably, they were hoping to earn condemnation for the hospital by starting an outbreak of smallpox. They were tarred, feathered, and paraded through the streets in response. At the end of January, After the patients had fled the hospital in light of the unrest, 20 men took tubs of tar to the island and set the buildings ablaze. The rioters did not awaken the 3 men who had volunteered to clean the hospital and had brought their families with them. Those people managed to escape safely. Despite the burning of the hospital, residents continued to threaten more violence in the following weeks. 2 men were arrested for the burning, but a mob broke them out of jail. At the same time, a large group from Marblehead called for arms to defend the 2 men. The proprietors dropped the charges in an attempt to stem the violence. The last incident of Castle Pox occurred in March 1774, when a man who had previously been caught smuggling infected clothing from the island was caught doing so again. That night he was dragged from his bed by a mob and publicly whipped. A report from the General Court found the townspeople's worries to be serious and their actions justifiable in the face of a smallpox threat. The proprietors were frustrated with that report. In the end, it didn't matter. The American Revolutionary War broke out the next year, and everyone had bigger problems to worry about, like whether their town was going to be occupied or their husband shot by the British. The Battle of Castle Pox faded into history behind Bunker Hill and Yorktown. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you want. There's always more history.